Hello! Today we are going to learn about inequalities and how to solve them. All right, inequalities. Key thing to remember is inequalities, they have different symbols. So we have a symbol that looks like this. This is called a greater than. This is a less than sign. This is greater than or equal to. This is less than or equal to. Something important to remember about inequalities is they have infinite solutions. So let's say I had x is greater than 4. That literally means my solution can be any number that's bigger than 4. It could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 5.2. Any number that's bigger than 4, x could be in this situation. So it has infinite solutions. Let's say it was x is greater than or equal to 4. That means my solutions could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 11, it could be 1,000, right? Any number bigger than 4 could be a solution. Greater than or equal to 4, I should say, for that one, could be a solution. So remember, inequalities have infinite solutions. All right, so how do we solve inequalities? When we solve inequalities, what we do is we identify the variable we're solving for, and then we use the exact same steps that we use to solve multi-step equations. I usually use the steps "don't call me after midnight" to help me remind myself what to do. So D, don't distribute, C, combine, M, move the variables to one side, A, add or subtract, M, multiply or divide. However, there's one special rule that we have to remember when we're solving inequalities, and that is if we multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, we must flip the inequality sign. So what do I mean by that? So if I had this example, negative 2x is greater than 6, and I had to solve for x, I know I would divide here because negative 2x means multiply. I have to do the inverse or opposite to get rid of it and leave me with x. I would have to do the same thing to the other side, right? 6 divided by negative 2 would give me negative 3. So I divided it by a negative, so I would flip my inequality sign. So this is a greater than sign. I would make it a less than sign. And that would be my final answer. X is less than negative 3. So remember, if you multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, you must flip the inequality sign. All right, so let's do an example. I have this inequality here. I'm going to see my inequality sign. I'm going to treat that like my equal sign, and I'm going to draw a line straight down to separate my two sides. And remember, don't call me after midnight. The D stands for distribute. I don't have any parentheses, so I'm done with that step. My next step, combine. I can't combine anything on my left. I can't combine anything on my right. I'm done with that step. My next step, move the variables to one side. Well, I only have one variable, and it's already on one side, so I'm done with that step. So now I can add or subtract. So I have to get rid of this negative 9. I'm going to do plus 9 to get rid of it. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So 26 plus 9 would be 35. And then I can bring down this negative 5x that's on the left side. And I'm done with my add or subtract step. My last step here is multiply or divide. So I have negative 5x, that means multiply, so I have to do the inverse or the opposite to get rid of it. So I'm going to divide by negative 5 to leave me with x, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. 35 divided by negative 5 will give me negative 7. And I divided it by a negative, so I have to flip my sign. So I look up here, I see my original sign was less than sign. I'm going to flip it and make it a greater than sign. So I have x is greater than negative 7. That's my final answer. All right, let's try another example. So I have this big long inequality. My inequality sign, I'm going to draw a line straight down to separate it, separate my two sides. My first step, and don't call me after midnight, is D, distribute. So I'm going to take this number on the outside and multiply it to both things on the inside. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Negative 2 times 2y would give me negative 4y. And then I can bring everything else down because there's no other parentheses to get rid of. And I'm done with my distribute step. My next step is this C, that means combine. So I can combine my like terms. So if I look on the left side here, I see I have a negative 4y and a plus 2y. I can combine these two because they have the same variable raised to the same power. Negative 4 plus 2 would be negative 2y. And then I can bring down this negative 10, and I can bring down this 20 on this side because there's nothing to combine it with over here. And I'm done with my combine step. My next step is move the variable to one side. I only have one variable, so I'm done with that step. My next step is add or subtract. Remember, I want to get this y by itself, so I want to get rid of this negative 10, and I can do that by doing plus 10 to get rid of that and leave me with negative 2y. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side. So 20 plus 10 would give me 30. And I'm done with my adding and subtracting step. And then finally, my last step is multiply or divide. So I have negative 2y. I know a number next to a letter means multiply, so I have to divide to get rid of that and leave me with just my variable. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side. 30 divided by negative 2 would be negative 15. So I divided it by a negative, so I can't forget my special rule. I have to flip my sign. So this was a less than sign. I'm going to flip it and make it a greater than sign. So my final answer is y is greater than negative 15. All right, let's solve one more example. So don't call me after midnight. That's the steps we have to use, right? I see my inequality sign. I'm going to build a wall to separate my two sides. First step is D for distribute. So I'm going to take this number on the outside, this negative 5, and multiply it by both things on the inside to get rid of that parentheses. Negative 5 times 2x would be negative 10x. Negative 5 times positive 9 would give me negative 45. And then I can bring everything else down because there's no other parentheses. And on this side I have 2x plus 3. I can bring that down. And I am done with my distribute step. All right, my next step here is C for combine my like terms. So I look on my left side and I see I can combine this 6x and this negative 10x. 6x minus 10x would be negative 4x. And then I can bring down this negative 45. I can't combine it with anything on this side. On my right side, I can't combine 2x and 3 because they don't have the same variable raised to the same power, so I can just bring that down as well, and I'm done with my combine step. All right, my next step is M, and that's move the variables to one side. So I have a variable on this side and a variable on this side. I want to move them to the same side. So I'm going to do a minus 2x here to get rid of this positive 2x. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side. Negative 4 minus 2 would be negative 6, and the x stays with it, and then I can bring everything else down. And on this side, I'm just left with 3 because that 2x canceled out. And I'm done with moving my variables to one side. All right, my next step is add or subtract. So I want to get this x by itself, so I have to get rid of this minus 45, and I'm going to be doing that by doing plus 45, because the opposite of minus is addition. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side. 3 plus 45 would give me 48. And over here, these canceled out, so I'm left with negative 6x. And I'm done with my adding and subtracting step. And my last step here is multiply or divide. So I see I have a number next to a letter. That means multiply. So to get rid of it, I have to divide. So I'm going to divide by negative 6 to leave me with x. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. 48 divided by negative 6 would give me negative 8. And I divided it by a negative, so I can't forget my special rule. I have to flip that sign. So this was a less than or equal to sign. I'm going to flip it so it's greater than or equal to. So my final answer is x is greater than or equal to negative 8. All right, that is inequalities and how to solve them. So when you're solving inequalities, remember, use the same steps as solving multi-step equations. Don't call me after midnight. But remember that special rule, if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you must flip the inequality sign. If you have any questions, please ask your teacher.